Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Entering the nudist beach, a flurry of looks fell on the wife of our protagonist, and this is what happened next. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. My name is John Hubble, and I recently divorced my wife after 25 years of marriage. Mary and I met when I walked into the manufacturing plant where she worked as a secretary. I sell tools. In fact, I drive a truck and deliver tools to factories and small businesses. I bought my lot from our tool company, and any sales made by those businesses went to my account. I'll tell you more about my business later. I still have my business, which I've been running for 28 years. I remember the first time I walked into the business where Mary worked. When she smiled at me, I was captivated. She was very beautiful and had one of those bubbly personalities. We hit it off immediately. The only problem was that I lived in Steubenville, Ohio, and she worked in Warren, Ohio. The two cities were at least 60 miles apart. I usually visited businesses along my route once a month. After meeting Mary, I asked her out, and we quickly became a couple. I went to see her every weekend. We had been together for about 3 months when I asked her to marry me. I was 26 years old and had dated quite a few women, but I had never felt the same way about them as I did about Mary. She was 24 years old and had recently graduated from college. She had been working as a secretary for about 6 months when we met. On our first 2 dates, we kissed and hugged. On the third date, I told her that I had rented a room and was going to stay the night after dinner, some dancing and drinking. She came to my room, and we made love. We got married 6 months later and went on a cruise for our honeymoon. We flew to Florida, where we were met by a cruise ship tour bus. After boarding and before the ship left the dock, we had a night. Then we met the captain, and the guide showed us around the ship. Our lunches were included, and we either ate or had an intim for 3 days. That's not entirely true, but we did do it a lot. There was a bit of gambling during the day, and drinking and dancing at night. On the second day of the cruise, the ship docked, and we went to the beach. I don't know why, but there were 2 beaches, one for nudists. Mary said, "Why not? No one knows us, and it seems quite brave." I agreed with her idea, and we headed to the nudist beach. We were young and just having fun. There was a sign at the entrance that read, "Night on the beach is prohibited." I thought it was quite funny. As we took off our clothes, grabbed towels, and headed to the beach, I was surprised by the number of people there. It seemed like there were mostly couples, as well as some groups of women. I didn't see any men sitting together, but on the other hand, I was too busy looking at all the women. I think Mary looked at the men too, although she didn't say anything. All I knew was that the men were looking at Mary as we passed by. I thought that perhaps the decision to go to a nudist beach was a mistake. Mary and I moved as far away from most other people as possible. The cruise line provided us with blankets to lie on as well as extra towels. After a couple of hours, we decided to have lunch. The cruise line provided a buffet under a picnic shelter. We had to show our room key so they knew we were from a cruise. As we prepared to walk to the shed, I asked Mary to wrap a towel around her lower half. I said it was bad enough that these men could see her breasts. She laughed as we headed to the locker room. I was right, men did look at her. After the cruise, we lived in Warren. I gave up my rental mobile home in Steubenville, and renting a truck to move my stuff was a no-brainer. We lived in the apartment for about 6 months before Mary found out she was pregnant, so we started looking for a house. Over the next 3 years, we had 2 daughters. Janet was the eldest, followed by Susan. Mary's mother looked after the girls while Mary and I worked. Life seemed pretty good. We had problems like most marriages, but we were always able to work them out. My job required me to be on the road 5 days a week. Since it was my business, I decided to take days off to be with my family. I usually returned home as often as possible but stayed in motels maybe twice a week on average. This was the best option for us. 10 years later, our intimate activity had decreased significantly. We still made love at least a couple of times a month. At this point, I should mention that Mary had gained a lot of weight. I also gained a few pounds, but Mary never lost any weight after having our girls. Every few months, she went on a new diet. She didn't tell me how much she had gained, but she wasn't wearing a swimsuit. I saw that she had gained weight, but I told her that I still loved her and would always be there for her. She carried this extra weight throughout the years while the girls were growing up. I told her repeatedly that I loved her and didn't care how much she weighed. While Susan was still in high school, Mary became even more depressed. Our intimate life almost stopped. She gained even more weight, and when she went to the doctor, he told her she needed to lose weight if she wanted to see her grandchildren grow up. We didn't have grandchildren yet, but Mary decided she needed help. The doctor suggested gastric surgery, and we looked into the matter. Mary had to talk to a psychiatrist and a nutritionist to find out if she could handle the surgery and its consequences. Our insurance covered the gastric surgery, which was a big relief for me. We discussed it, and I told her that I would support her as much as I could. She underwent the surgery and spent 4 days in the hospital. I was with her every day. The doctor said everything went well, and she now needed to follow the nutritionist's recommendations. Mary could barely eat anything other than baby food and other soft foods for a month. After 3 months, she could eat almost normal food, but her stomach was now very small. She could only eat a few bites before feeling full. Small meals 6 times a day sound like a lot until you consider that half a banana is a meal. She found it difficult to cook for me, so I told her that I would cook for myself and that she just needed to follow her new diet. The silver lining in all this was that Mary was losing weight quickly. After 6 months, she had lost 70 pounds. By the end of the year, she had lost over 100 pounds. The doctors were pleased with the results, but it was all up to Mary to maintain the weight. She looked great to me, but she was still unhappy. She walked or used the treadmill every day. People constantly complimented her on her weight loss. When I asked her what was bothering her, she said it was the extra skin that was hanging on her. It was mostly hidden except for her hands. She told me she wanted to make her upper arms smaller. As always, I was with her throughout the entire procedure. She had outpatient surgery and required nursing care for the first week. She always used her vacation time for operations. One of the big downsides was that our insurance didn't cover it. They considered it cosmetic surgery. She was able to return to work but wore long-sleeve shirts until her arms healed. I have to admit that her arms did look smaller without the extra fat, and she received more compliments from everyone. What I didn't mention was that during all these surgeries and recoveries, our nightlife had pretty much stopped. She always told me that she needed time to recover after the gastric surgery and hand surgery. She seemed much happier, probably because of all the compliments and attention she was getting. For some reason, she became more self-centered. Everything was about her. She was watching medical shows on TV and said she wanted liposuction. When I asked what it was, she said it involved removing excess fat from the abdominal area and was somewhat like a tummy tuck, basically getting rid of excess skin around the abdomen. I told her that she looked fine and there was no reason for people to see her bare stomach. We argued, and in the end, she won again. She ended up in the hospital and stayed there for a couple of days. Our insurance paid about half the cost. They again considered part of the surgery to be cosmetic. I was there for her and stayed with her after she returned home. She couldn't lift anything for several months, so I did most of the cooking and cleaning. It's strange how she began to act more like a boss than a loving wife. Once she recovered and most of the scars had faded a little, she told me she wanted breast surgery. We discussed it for a long time. She wanted implants, but she didn't want breast augmentation. She didn't like the fact that her breasts sagged and only looked good in a bra. She told me she would have the surgery whether I liked it or not. The surgery was done as an outpatient procedure, and I have to admit that after it healed, it looked good. Of course, the insurance company didn't pay anything. Mary spent almost all of our savings. When I told her about this, she said that it was our savings, not just mine. There was no use arguing with her. I asked her if she was finally done with these surgeries, and I couldn't believe it when she said she was going to have another one. I said, "What the hell else do you need to do? You've had gastric surgery, reduced your arms, tightened your tummy, and done your breasts. You have the body of a woman 15 years younger," although I added, "I can never touch it." She was watching another TV show, and it was about a facelift or something like that. They would remove excess skin under the neck and wrinkles around the lips and eyes. She promised me that this would be the last operation. It was an outpatient procedure, but she needed to take 2 weeks off work to recover. Well, she went through with it. As always, I was there for her, and I have to admit that when she came out of surgery, she looked like she had been in a car accident. Her face was bruised and swollen, and her head was bandaged from chin to crown. I took a couple of days off to be home with her. She didn't want anyone to see her, and she was so medicated that she didn't know where she was. I couldn't believe how quickly she healed. After a few days, the bandages were removed, and she was able to wash and clean herself up. After 2 weeks, she looked better. She had stitches behind her ears but wore a wig so no one could see. A month later, she looked great. It didn't change her overall appearance, but without the wrinkles, she looked much younger. She went back to the doctors, who gave her before and after photos. I swear she looked 15 to 20 years younger. She was more satisfied than ever and started buying prettier clothes, seeming to gain confidence. Our daughters were delighted with their mother's new look. I remember them saying that all these surgeries really made a difference. Janet said she didn't think she could go through all that pain, and her husband would have to accept her for who she is. Susan stood up for her mother and said there was nothing wrong with looking good if you can afford it. Our lives went on, and I thought we would become closer, but that didn't happen. When I returned from trips, Mary never seemed happy to see me. She didn't even ask how my days were. All she talked about was herself and how everyone said how good she looked. She even told me that the girls in the office wanted to see her breasts, and she showed them. I thought maybe she showed them to some of the guys too. Our nightlife did not improve. It seemed like the only time we had a night was after she was drinking. Since she wasn't eating much anymore, the alcohol affected her much faster. So if we went to a family event or dinner, I had a chance at intimate. When I asked her to go somewhere with me, she usually found some excuse not to go. It seemed like she was ashamed of me. She never said this, but that's the impression I got. We went to events with family or old friends, and it wasn't too bad. We used to spend the evening listening to everyone say how good she looked and how lucky I was to have her. I have to admit, I was tired of hearing this, especially when some of my old friends said how good Mary looked and how, if she were their wife, they would spend a lot more time in bed. If only they knew that for the past 5 years, since all these surgeries began, we could be considered lucky if we had an intim twice a year. It was only recently that I learned that if she drank, I might have better luck. Over the next few months, I honestly began to wonder if she was cheating on me. She didn't want to go anywhere with me and started going out with her friends at least once a month. Some of the signs were obvious, so I started checking when she wasn't home. I looked at her emails, I knew her password and read all her deleted and new messages. I didn't find anything other than messages to her friends about how much she liked being paid attention to. I checked her underwear as sometimes advised and looked through our phone logs for the last few months. Again, nothing. Same with her cell phone, no numbers I hadn't seen before. I knew almost everyone she worked with. I knew there were always men interested, but I didn't notice anything unusual. We went to her Christmas party, and she avoided me as best she could. I kept an eye on her, but other than a few dances and conversations with friends, I didn't see anything suspicious. Of course, I saw several men try to make advances, but she brushed them off, so I didn't interfere. Everyone said they wished they could have a woman who looked as good as Mary in bed. I wanted to say, damn it, I wish I could do that myself. I didn't know what men were saying to her on the dance floor, but it looked like flirting on both sides. Mary often looked at me, and any flirting immediately stopped. At least I got night of the Christmas party. I think all the attention she got and the drinking played a role. Now, it was just intimate for Mary, not love. It was easy to tell the difference, no real affection, no hugging, and very little kissing. After that, she would get up and go to the shower as if I had a louse or something. Life hasn't been the same since the surgeries began. I really felt that Mary considered herself too good for me now. I had to wonder how long our marriage would last. I even told her that I would go shopping with her, although she knew that I didn't like it. She simply said that one of her friends or our daughters would go with her. When she walked with Janet, I didn't worry, but if she walked with her friends, I even followed her. They used to go to the mall and have lunch. She now ate like a bird and usually brought home leftovers. I didn't see anything unusual. Of course, I didn't know what they were talking about. Maybe I've become paranoid. If I ever talked to her about anything, it was like I was some kind of villain, and every conversation turned into an argument. One day, I asked her if she had a boyfriend. She called me all sorts of names and said that she never cheated on me and that I was just jealous of her appearance. I couldn't believe it. Jealous? Heck, I sat with her for 5 years through all these surgeries and never complained. On the last 2 girls' nights, I even followed her. I wore a baseball cap, which I never wore, and sat in the far corner of the room, doing everything possible to avoid being noticed. How would I explain this? She danced and flirted with several guys, nothing serious, maybe because her friends were married and she didn't want witnesses. Although Mary was 50, she looked much younger. She danced and flirted with men of all ages, almost all of whom were in good shape. I think she liked muscles. Both times I followed her, I got home before her. I was glad she drank because then I had a chance to have a night. I needed to do something to try to save our marriage. I honestly didn't know if I loved her as much as I did before, but we were still married, and I decided to try. I bought us a ticket on a cruise ship. It was a 3-day, 2-night cruise to the Bahamas, just like we did for our honeymoon. This was our first vacation in real time together since she lost weight and had surgeries. I was surprised that she wasn't excited about the cruise. I thought it was because she would have to be with me for 3 days. Either way, she took some time off. I found a friend to replace me on my instrumental route. I decided to make one last attempt to save our marriage. I wasn't going to continue living the way I was. I felt more like a house robot than a husband. I drove to the airport in Cleveland, Ohio, parked in a long-term parking lot, and we flew to Florida, where we were met by a cruise line bus. I was feeling pretty good and was hoping this cruise would make a difference. We boarded the ship and went to our cabin. The first thing I did was walk up behind her and hug her, like we did on our honeymoon. "John, what are you doing?" she asked. I thought we could make love like we did on our honeymoon. For God's sake, we're older now, and I need to get ready for the dating party. The start was not what I expected, but I had 2 nights and 3 days to hope that things would change. She looked great, dressed for the party. She even smiled when I told her how good she looked. Maybe this would really work, I thought. We met hundreds of people at the party. Mary said where she was from and always mentioned her age. This way, she received all the compliments she was counting on. After the party, we went to our dining room. The system was that you had permanent seats throughout the cruise for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You sat with the same group of people. Of course, there were other restaurants on the ship if you wanted something more casual, and you could also order food to your room. Since all meals were included, most guests ate in the main dining room if they remained on board. We sat at a table with 3 other couples, Henry and Elena, who were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, Carl and Judy, who I later learned were not married, and Tony and Pia, whom I'll tell you about later. We ordered dinner and talked with other guests at our table. I told Henry we were celebrating our 25th anniversary. Carl looked at Mary and said he couldn't believe that Mary had been married for so long. Then I had to listen to all the compliments about Mary and how lucky I was. Carl said he didn't understand why Mary married such an old man. He thought I must have money. Of course, Mary laughed and said she would. I already knew that Carl would be a problem. Tony and Pia were more reserved, allowing Carl to lead the conversation. Carl had already suggested that we all go to the main hall for music and dancing after dinner. Henry and Elena refused, saying they wanted to go out on deck and relax. To be honest, I would have preferred that too, but Mary immediately agreed and said we would be happy to go to the hall. Judy didn't say anything but looked at me several times. Tony and Pia were going to do what Carl wanted. I'll skip ahead a little and talk about Carl, Judy, Tony, and Pia. I got most of the information from Judy while Mary and Carl danced. Judy was a waitress in Pittsburgh. She was 42 years old and quite attractive. I wondered what she was doing with Carl, who was 38 and rather arrogant. They just didn't seem right for each other. Although, from a woman's point of view, Carl could be considered handsome, I'm sure he had a cute face and, as I later found out, six-pack abs. How did you and Carl meet? I asked Judy. We're not a couple. Carl is a regular at our restaurant. He always flirted and seemed nice. I know he's arrogant, but he was always nice to me. I didn't want to assume anything, but I started to say something when Judy interrupted me. He asked me out many times, and I always said no. I've never been married and don't go on dates very often. Carl told me that he and his friend each received 2 cruise tickets for high sales. They both work in pharmaceutical companies, mainly selling to doctors, clinics, and hospitals. Carl asked if I wanted to go on a cruise with him. It wouldn't cost me anything. I'm not stupid, and I knew I'd have to have intimate with him, but he's nice to look at, and it wouldn't be that much of a price. He said I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do, so I thought it was a good offer and agreed. He asked if I had a girlfriend who would like to go with Tony. Tony was only 30 years old and would probably want someone younger. He had recently broken up with his girlfriend. Carl mentioned that the same rules would apply to any woman who came with us. I liked the idea because it meant I'd have a girlfriend. I've known Pia for several years. She's 27 and a waitress and dancer at a local club. I knew she was a little wild and would immediately agree to a free cruise to the Bahamas, so here we are. I think Carl was a little charmed when he saw Pia. She's really pretty to look at. He probably wishes he was with her instead of me. No wonder Tony couldn't be happier. We flew here from Pittsburgh, and I hope everything works out. I could use a little vacation. So, you and Carl are just friends? I asked. Yeah, I don't think it's going to go any further. It's too much of a party for me. This cruise was just a nice vacation for me, Judy replied. The 6 of us entered the hall and everyone sat down together. I asked Mary to dance and took her hand. I'm not much of a dancer, but I tried to recreate something with my wife. All she talked about was finding new friends to hang out with. It was as if she wanted to be with anyone but me. After our dance, we sat down. The others returned to the table, and Carl immediately asked Mary to dance. She didn't even look at me as she stood up. She had a big smile on her face. Tony and Pia went dancing too, and I stayed sitting and talking to Judy. It was then that she told me about herself, Carl, and the others, and how they arrived on the ship. Judy was a beautiful woman. I could understand why Carl asked her out. She had a pleasant personality and really seemed caring. We talked about our families and work. She had a daughter about the same age as my youngest. I told her about my tool sales and delivery business, and she really seemed interested. I thought maybe she was a good listener because she was a waitress. Songs were played before the others returned to the table. Mary said she had danced with Carl and Tony, and they had to stop and rest a bit. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to start an argument over something as small as a few dances. Carl ordered drinks, and I was surprised that Mary took one. She didn't handle alcohol very well. I danced with Mary one more time, and then she danced with Carl and Tony most of the time. I think she was trying to outdo Pia. Apparently, no one told her that Pia was also a dancer and waitress at the club. I did 2 slow dances with Judy. She didn't show off or act like she was participating in some kind of competition. I really enjoyed spending time with her. It was getting late, and we needed to rest up before the big day tomorrow. The ship dropped us off at the beach, where we were to spend the entire day. There were 2 beaches and a casino. I also bought tickets to a show with topless dancers and everything. I thought I could get rid of Carl so Mary and I could enjoy the cruise, but that did not happen. While they were dancing, Mary told Carl about our plans for tomorrow. When they returned to the table, Mary mentioned that she had invited everyone to the beach the next day. I said, "That's nice," but probably didn't look too happy. Judy and I took a few steps away from the others when she said, "Sorry, we're interrupting your anniversary. Would you like me to talk to Carl?" "No," I replied. "It's probably as much Mary's fault as it is Carl's. I guess we'll just have to see how things play out." Judy smiled at me. "John, thanks for keeping me company. I had a wonderful evening. I didn't have to worry about chasing Carl away for half the evening. You're a good person. I hope Mary sees that." I didn't know what to think. Was she just being nice? I had to wonder if Carl or Tony had made overtures to Mary. The dance floor was quite full, and I couldn't always see them. Mary hugged Carl and Tony and told them she would see them tomorrow. We headed to our cabin. I watched Mary undress. She really had a beautiful body, although it cost a lot of money. We got into bed, and I tried to hug her. Then she told me that she was sorry but had drunk and eaten too much and her stomach hurt. She got up and went to the bathroom, and I heard her vomiting. She came back and told me that she just couldn't eat the way she used to. She apologized and said she might feel better the next day. She took some medicine for her stomach. I just lay there thinking that the first day of 3 didn't go well. Instead of bringing us closer, it seemed to separate us. The next morning, there was an all-you-can-eat buffet for breakfast. I got myself a plate of food like everyone else. Mary returned with bagels. She said she had eaten too much the night before and was paying for it. Elena brought Henry a plate of food. She said that if he had gone on his own, he would have taken everything that he was not allowed to eat. He just laughed and said how she always worries about him. Instead of getting angry, he kissed her. After breakfast, everyone returned to their cabins and put on their beach clothes. Carl walked next to Judy. I thought maybe she had told him something. Mary didn't say much as we headed towards the beach. Carl spoke up, "Anyone for a nudist beach?" He looked at Mary, and she smiled at him. "No," I replied. "I don't have a body that anyone would want to see." I tried to say it as a joke, but I really meant it. Mary looked at me with a strange expression. If it were just the two of us, I might have considered it, but not with Carl and Tony staring at her. Judy spoke up, "I'm not crazy about the scene either. 20 years ago, I might have considered it, but I think I've grown up since then." Pia said she just wanted to get in the water. She didn't care where they went. Tony just wanted to see women in swimsuits and without clothes. He didn't care. We headed to the usual beach. We laid out the blankets and towels that were provided for us. We also rented some loungers. "Damn it, I'm too old to lie on the ground," I said. I took Mary's hand and asked her to walk with me to the water. Everyone got up and went into the ocean. All 3 women were wearing 2-piece swimsuits. They all looked great. Pia's swimsuit was the most revealing. Mary's swimsuit showed a lot of cleavage. It was the first time I saw her in it. She bought it for the trip. From the way she walked with me, I realized that she was showing off in front of Carl, who was walking behind us. Our cruise had not yet gone as planned. I promised myself that I would do my best not to start an argument with her on this cruise. The whole purpose of the cruise was to bring us closer together, but that wasn't happening. We were all in the water, just floating lazily. I tried to hug Mary, but she said she wasn't comfortable in front of everyone. She didn't even kiss me. I was a little sad and just swam for a bit. It didn't surprise me that Carl was immediately at her side as soon as I walked 10 feet away. There they were, acting like best friends. Why did he want her when he had Judy, who was older than him and honestly looked just as good? I was swimming while my mind was busy wondering what I should do next when I encountered another person. It was Judy. "Hello, stranger," Judy said. "Hey to you too. Are you enjoying the ocean?" I asked. "Oh, that's so nice. I just wanted to let you know that I mentioned to Carl that you told me you wanted to spend more time with Mary for your anniversary," she said. "What did he say?" I asked. He didn't really say anything, just grinned. I respect him less and less, I have to admit. He's still acting nice on this cruise, but I think he'd rather be with Pia or Mary. I decided to just enjoy my little vacation and do what I like. I feel the same way. I'm doing my best to enjoy this trip, but I'm not going to beg Mary to do something with me. If our marriage fails, it will be because she made her own choices, I said. We all got out of the water and sat down on our chairs. Mary and Pia decided to lie down on the blankets and sunbathe. Judy said that she didn't really like sunbathing, she would burn first, so she sat under the umbrella next to me. Before I could say anything, Carl suggested that Mary apply lotion to her. She said please, as if I wasn't there. Tony was applying lotion to Pia. I needed to get out of there. I didn't know how much more of this flirting I could take. I told everyone I didn't like sitting in the sun and thought I'd go upstairs to the pavilion and gamble a little. I asked Mary if she wanted to come with me, to which she replied that she would prefer to sunbathe. I received several looks of rejection from Judy. I told Mary that if she changed her mind, I would be playing the slot machines, otherwise, I would see her at 3 o'clock at the lunch buffet. I played the slot machines and got free drinks. I thought about Mary and realized that our marriage was on its last legs. I was just going to see how the rest of the cruise went. I knew I was drinking too much, but I didn't care. A few seconds later, a woman sat down next to me at the machines. I looked and saw it was Judy. I was completely surprised to see her. "What are you doing here? Where are Mary and the others?" I asked. "They decided to go to the nudist beach shortly after you left." I told Carl it wasn't for me, but he didn't care. I told them I'd play the slot machines and see them at 3 o'clock. "I'm sorry, John. He's coming for Mary, and I really can't do anything about it. I don't own him, only you can stop him." "No, it's up to Mary. All she has to do is say no." I admit that I don't like Carl and that he's arrogant, but he didn't force himself on Mary. "She was with him by choice," I answered. I was sad because I thought this last attempt with the cruise might somehow bring Mary and me closer, but it didn't. I decided for now to just go with the flow and see what happens. Judy joined me at the machines. She said she didn't really have any money to spend, so I took one of the plastic cups and poured half my coins into it. "You don't have to do that," Judy said. "My pleasure. Besides, most of them are wins." "I guess I'm doing well," I said, giving Judy a small smile. "Besides, I enjoy the company." We enjoyed each other's company and played on different machines. If Judy's glass was almost empty, I would refill it. This is what I wanted to do with Mary, but she was not interested in me. Maybe she thought I was too old, even though we were almost the same age. I admit I wasn't tall, dark, or handsome, but I was always kind to her and always there when she needed me. So, I guess she didn't need me anymore. The other 4 met us at the buffet. I looked at Mary, and she knew I was angry. "So, did you enjoy showing yourself off to the world?" I decided to be direct. I didn't care what she thought. I hadn't done anything wrong. "I'm not ashamed of my body, it's you who don't want to have fun." Mary replied, "If letting strange men touch and look at you is fun, then you're right. It's not fun for me to watch." Tony spoke up for the first time. "Hey man, leave her alone." "So what if she had some fun?" I interrupted him. "She's not your expletive wife, so stay out of this." I was starting to get angry. It's not typical for me to say that. "Are you having a problem with me, bro?" said Tony. "Let's go out and solve this like men. Otherwise, shut the hell up." "She's a grown woman and can do what she wants," I said. Needless to say, I stood no chance in a fight with any of these young men. Besides, what would I be fighting for? I took a plate of food and sat down. I ate alone. Mary sat with Carl and Tony. Judy and Pia went to the restroom. I ate and then went to Mary. I didn't even look at the 2 men. "Mary, I'm going back to the ship. Will you come with me?" "Of course," she replied. I finished eating. I didn't want to overeat and get sick and miss the party that night. "What party?" Mary asked. "I have tickets to the show at the venue." "We'll talk about this later," I said. "Carl, Tony, I'll see you tonight," she said as we headed towards the ship. On the way to the ship, we argued, first about how she tried to avoid me, then about how she wanted to spend time with Carl, who was already with another woman. "They're just friends," Mary said. "Not really. He just took her on a cruise for company." "So what does this have to do with you?" I asked. "We're married and should be celebrating our 25th anniversary. Instead, you're spending all your time with Carl and Tony. They're young and fun." I was just flirting a little. "It's okay." I don't believe that it was just flirting. I wasn't born yesterday. Tonight, you and I will go to the hall on the island and watch the show as planned. We already have tickets. I'm not interested in your old show. I'm going to party on the top deck with everyone else. Do what you want. It's the last night of the cruise, and I'm going to enjoy it, Mary replied. We didn't speak again on the way to the ship. Honestly, I didn't want to talk to her anymore. She went to our cabin, and I sat by the pool and talked with Henry and Elena. They seemed so happy together. They told me their secret of how they managed to live together for 40 years. They put each other first and always communicated. They tried not to go to bed arguing. It wasn't always easy, but we never kept secrets from each other, Henry said. We could always talk and work out our differences. We didn't always agree, but our love always won, Elena added. Before heading back to the cabin, I picked up the flyer for the party Mary was talking about. It took place on the third deck and was intended for adults only. The flyer mentioned that it was a progressive nudist party. I didn't understand, so I asked one of the ship's employees. Well, sir, it starts out as an evening party. Everyone is dressed in smart clothes, the men in suits, the women in dresses or blouses and skirts. Every hour, they take off some of their clothes. This continues all evening and night. The last clothing left is usually a swimsuit or underwear. After this, it is announced that only nudists are allowed to participate in the Nudist Day celebrations. Guests can leave the party at any time. Food and drinks are included in the ticket price. The cost is $50 for a couple or $30 for one. We hope to see you there. I thanked the woman for the information. It was getting late, and I knew I needed to get back to the cabin. Mary was already getting dressed. She put on a beautiful skirt and blouse. I didn't know if she was wearing underwear or a swimsuit. I was hoping she was getting ready to go to the show with me. The party started at 9 o'clock and the show at 10 o'clock. We had to go ashore to go to the sound stage. I put on a suit and tie, and we still didn't talk. I guess I had to speak first. You look wonderful, Mary. I hope we enjoy the show. I'm going to a party, not a show. I already told you that you can come with us if you want, Mary replied. Mary, this will be another nudist party and will probably end in some kind of madness. Guests can leave the party at any time. I'll probably come back after everyone gets into their swimsuits. Carl and Tony are hilarious, and you didn't give them a chance. A chance for what? Mary asked. For them to sleep with you? What the hell happened to you? We're not kids anymore. We're adults and should have more common sense. Mary, I'm going to the hall. If you want to come with me and save our marriage, then come and meet me. If you prefer your party and your guys, then I'll know what you've chosen. Just so you understand exactly what I said, our marriage will be over if you go to the party. I know you better than anyone. You won't end our marriage because I will go to a party. I don't believe you, Mary replied. I went into the lounge, ordered a drink, sat down, and looked at the stairs leading to the third deck. I watched as many young couples went up. I noticed Tony and Pia, but they probably didn't see me. Then I saw Carl and Judy. Judy looked my way, but Carl headed up the stairs. She stopped for a moment and glanced at me. A few minutes later, Mary came in and stood by the stairs. We looked at each other, and I stood up, hoping she would come to me. Perhaps we still had a chance. While we were looking at each other, she turned and walked up to the third deck without looking back. I gave her an ultimatum, and she made her choice. At that moment, I realized our marriage was over. I decided to spend the rest of the evening and the next day trying to enjoy the trip a little. It was after 9 o'clock, and I knew the party had started. Several more people were climbing the stairs. Soon, I saw a woman coming downstairs. It was Judy. She came to my table and sat down. I'm sorry, John. You deserve so much more than you're getting. You're too good a person to be treated like this. Why aren't you at the big party? I asked Carl why he wasn't waiting upstairs to see if Mary and I would come. When he saw that Mary was alone, he just laughed. When he walked up to her, he kissed her. That was enough for me. I told him I'd save him $30 and left. If you remember, when we first talked, I told you I was going on this cruise, but I didn't know it to Carl. I thought I might have to have a night with him, but it wasn't a big deal. It turned out he was too drunk the first night to do anything. He just passed out. As soon as we got back to our cabin, I have 2 tickets to a stage show on the island if you're interested. The tickets are paid for, and you're not obligated to do anything but have fun. Do you want to come with me? I just have an extra ticket. Judy was dressed very nicely in a white blouse and black skirt. She later told me she was wearing a swimsuit underneath. I mentioned that maybe we could go for a swim in the pool when we got back from the show. She smiled at me as we took a taxi to the pavilion. The show was really good. For a couple of hours, I really enjoyed myself. I knew my marriage was over, so I decided to enjoy the moment. There were dancers, comedians, a juggler, and some great singers. Judy and I returned after midnight. She told me she had a wonderful evening and that Mary was a very foolish woman. I walked her to her cabin. She kissed me on the cheek and thanked me again for the invitation. I returned to my cabin, hoping that Mary was there, but of course, she was not. The room was exactly the same as when we had left it. I didn't want to be alone, so I went and sat in the hall for a couple of hours, trying to figure out what to do next. I could see the stairs to the third deck and occasionally saw some people returning from the party. I assumed not everyone stayed until the end. I was surprised to see Pia walking down the stairs alone. She headed towards her cabin. I thought I might have missed Mary and those two jokers. I might have missed them while I went to the men's room a few times. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning when I returned to my cabin, and Mary was still missing. I tried my best to sleep. At 4 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find one of the ship's workers. He had a drunken Mary with him, whom he brought to our cabin. I thanked him and even gave him a $5 tip. What a waste of money. He could have thrown her overboard, and I wouldn't have cared. She was wearing only a swimsuit and a robe, which was probably provided by the ship's crew. He handed me a bag with the rest of her clothes. I threw her on the bed. She was in a terrible state. I took off her robe and noticed that someone had put a swimsuit on her. It was all twisted, and the bottom part was inside out. That was when I realized that she had cheated on me. I left the swimsuit on her. It was not difficult to understand that she was being used. I needed to know if she was being used or if she was volunteering for this party. I knew she went to the party, and it wouldn't change my opinion of her or our upcoming divorce. I was a very calm person, but if she was really used, I might have to deal with those responsible. Time would tell. It was the morning of the third day of our cruise. We had to leave the ship by 5 o'clock in the evening. The ship would remain there all day, and those who wished could leave it earlier. Our return flight tickets were for 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course, I couldn't sleep, so I packed all my things. I only had one suitcase. Mary had 2 suitcases and a carry-on bag. I became increasingly angry as I packed only my things. This was not good. I didn't want to do anything that could get me arrested. I took my phone and took some photos of Mary. I didn't know if they would help me, but I had no other proof. After packing, I went to one of the cafes on board and started drinking coffee. It was after 6 o'clock in the morning, and I decided to do a stupid thing. I went to Carl and Judy's cabin and knocked on the door. Why I knocked quietly, I don't know. Judy opened the door and was surprised to see me, especially so early in the morning. She was already dressed, which meant she had probably gotten up a long time ago. "John, what are you doing here?" "You know why I'm here. I need to find out what Carl and his friends did to my wife." "John, please calm down. Let's go to the cafe, and I'll tell you everything I know." Pia came back at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I talked to her for a long time. Carl and Tony came back around 4 o'clock. "Give me the key to the cabin, and I'll be there soon with you." She closed the door and returned a minute later. We went to one of the cafes, and she told me everything she knew from Pia. As she mentioned earlier, Pia was young and wild. Being without anything was not a problem for her. "John, what I'm about to tell you won't be pleasant. You won't like anything about it. I wouldn't tell you, but you deserve a lot better than Mary. I'm sorry, but she's nothing more than a woman of easy virtue. I don't want to insult your wife, so tell me everything you can. I saw her being used to the point of exhaustion. I need to know how prepared she was for this." Pia said 4 of them entered the party. The first hour was a sort of get-together with the other guests. Every hour, they would take off some of their clothes. By midnight, they were left in their underwear or swimsuits. At that point, some couples started to leave, but there were still dozens of people left. When the last clothes came off, it turned into a party where everyone swapped partners. Pia said she had a night with Tony while Mary was with Carl. Just so you know, they also swapped partners and had intimate exhibition beach during the day. Pia said they did it in the ocean after intimate with Tony and Carl. Pia got dressed again. She said that was enough for her, but Mary wanted to continue. Did Mary use illegal substances? I asked. Yes and no, John. She knew what she was doing, Pia said. No one, as far as she could tell, was forced to do anything against their will. After that, Pia returned to her cabin. I lowered my head and felt tears in my eyes, not for Mary, but for myself, for being such a fool and staying with her for so many years. I'm so sorry, John. You were the best part of this mini cruise for me. I really enjoyed our time together. I'm sorry for what happened to your marriage. Trust me, John, you deserve so much better. So, what did Carl say when he returned to the cabin? He was too drunk to say anything, but he smelled of alcohol and intim. I couldn't sleep after he went to bed. I sat in a chair and read a book. Then I got dressed and got ready to go out for coffee when you knocked. Too bad you're with that, I said. I'm not really with him, John. I went on that cruise, but it's funny that I didn't have to have a night with him. It was good after I found out what he's really like. I don't want to have intimate with him, we have nothing in common. We'll have breakfast if he wakes up in time and have lunch. Our plane leaves for Pittsburgh at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Our breakfast was scheduled for 8 o'clock, and it was almost that time. I checked who was there and saw Henry and Elena sitting at the table, both smiling. I walked to the table and sat down. While we were talking, Judy came over and joined us. Where is everyone else? Henry asked. We wanted to say goodbye. We're leaving the ship at 10 o'clock in the morning. We have an early flight to Iowa, Judy replied. I think everyone had a long night, and we decided to give them a chance to get some sleep. Maybe they'll wake up around lunchtime. Everyone laughed a little. My smile was false, but this sweet couple was not supposed to know anything about those scoundrels I left behind. We had a great breakfast, and I said goodbye to Henry and Elena. After they left, I told Judy that spending time with her was the only good thing about the cruise. I even said that I wished I had met her 25 years ago, before I met Mary. Thanks, John, but I was a little wild when I was young. After having my daughter, I think I've become more mature and family-oriented. It was nice meeting you, John. If you're ever in Pittsburgh, come to the East Side Restaurant Grill for breakfast at my expense. She hugged me and kissed me lightly, and we went our separate ways. I returned to my cabin and saw my drunken wife still lying on the bed. I placed her plane ticket on the dresser, grabbed my suitcase, and headed toward the ship's exit. I was sitting on the deck when the ship docked. I wasn't the first to get off, but I was pretty close. I took the bus and headed to the airport, hoping I could exchange my ticket for an earlier flight. Luckily, I was able to board a plane to Cleveland at 11 o'clock in the morning. I turned off my phone while I was on the plane and turned it back on while walking to my car at the airport. It showed that I had 3 missed calls, all from Mary, starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As I got into the car, the phone rang again. It was Mary. John, where the hell are you? She shouted. Well, good morning and happy anniversary to you. I see you're finally up. The ship docked at 10 o'clock this morning, and I received your first call after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Why didn't you answer? I was worried about you. Where are you, and why didn't you wake me up? God, you have a lot of questions, Mary. I'll try to answer them. I didn't answer your calls because my cell phone was turned off while I was on the plane, and you slept like that. Airplane? What airplane? Where are you, John? I'm in the car, getting ready to go home. After you were left on the doorstep this morning, I saw everything I wanted to see last night. I gave you a choice, and you chose to be with your friend. I boarded the ship as soon as it docked and took an early flight home. What about me? What should I do? You son of a... First of all, if you call me that again, I will hang up. I left your ticket on the dresser. Take it and your luggage on the plane. You can use the free bus. The plane will take you back to Cleveland. Are you going to meet me at the airport? No, damn it. Find your way home on your own. It's time for me to pack my things. I hope they will move me in the next few days. You an idiot, answered Mary. I hung up. Over the next hour, she called 4 more times. I was driving up to our driveway when Susan called. Dad, what's going on? Mom said you abandoned her in Florida. What's happening? I left her. She has a plane ticket to Cleveland, but I don't want anything to do with her anymore. I'll let her tell you the reason. If she doesn't tell you the truth, I'll tell you my side of the story. Are you going to meet her at the airport? She's my mom. I'm not going to leave her stranded. I can't believe you did that, Dad. The story is short and simple, Susan. She cheated on me with several men. She can tell you the details. I doubt she will. She'll somehow make it all my fault. I'm not going to live like a cuckolded husband. In the next couple of days, I will meet with a lawyer and leave. I should have left a long time ago, but I waited until you and Janice were on your own. Janice is married and you're in college. I will make sure you get whatever help you need. Dad, what happens when I bring her home? You won't harm her, will you? Of course not. I have never hit your mother, although I would have liked to have done so several times. I'll stay in Janice's old room until I leave. As long as your mother stays away from me, this won't happen. No problem. I lived with her for 25 years. I went ahead and pulled out a few boxes and started packing up most of my personal belongings. I wasn't a big material person, so I didn't have everything I needed. I started putting boxes into my tool truck. I had a lot of space there. I hadn't loaded it yet for next week's trip. My eldest daughter and her husband arrived at about 7 o'clock. Dad, what's going on? Susan called and said she needed to pick up Mom at the airport. How many times do I have to explain this? Your mother cheated on me on our anniversary cruise. I'm not going to tell you or your sister the details, but she ended our marriage. There's no chance we'll ever make peace after what she did. I am packing most of my personal belongings and will be leaving in a few days. I'll let you girls know where I'm moving. Another car pulled up, and it was Susan and her mother. It looked like Mary was crying. This did not upset me, but only made it worse. Paul, Janet's husband, was carrying Mary's suitcases. I went back to packing my things. Mary went with the girls to the kitchen. I heard them talking. Janet made coffee, and Mary told them some story about how she drank too much and how I didn't go to the party with her. She told them that someone pilled her and she ended up being taken advantage of. Of course, it was a different story than I had heard. Mary made herself the victim and me the reason she was used. I went in and got myself a cup of coffee, and Janet asked me in front of her mother if it was true. Janet, I know the truth, and so does your mother. Your mother was not a victim, and I will tell her everything I know after you girls leave. Unless your mother wants me to tell you in front of her, I will show you girls her pictures and tell you about some of her friends. Mary turned pale when she heard what I said. I didn't have any photos except on my phone, but Mary didn't know that. Besides, I mentioned several partners, and she had no way of knowing what I knew. You girls can go home. I'll be fine. I'll talk to you tomorrow after I talk to your father. Thanks, Susan, for picking me up. I appreciate it. I know it's time for you to go back to school. Thank you both for being here, and Paul, thank you for bringing my suitcases. There she was again, playing the role of the victim. Poor Mary. I've seen this many times over the years. I kissed the girls goodbye and told them I'd keep in touch. I wanted them to know that I would not stay married to their mother for long. As soon as they left, Mary began, "It's your fault for not going to the party with me. I drank too much. What photos do you have?" Mary, stop talking nonsense. I know everything you did, including night with Carl and Tony on the nudist beach. Pia must have told you. You little. She was the only person there. I knew it was true, and no, I never spoke to Pia. I just learned a lot of things. You used a lot, but it was your decision. After intimate with Carl and Tony, you did even crazier things. Was that all you wanted? How did you know? You weren't there, were you? You see, Mary, everything is coming out. I doubt you remember being abandoned at our door. Your bathing suit was turned inside out. Why don't you tell your daughters about this? You are an idiot. And you are a woman of easy virtue. I'll stay in Janet's old room for a couple of days until I figure out where to move. I'll take everything we have from you if you leave, Mary said. You will agree to my divorce proposal, otherwise, the truth will come out. What will your family and friends think when they find out what you did on the cruise? She had nothing more to say. I packed all my personal belongings except for the clothes I needed for a couple of days. I unpacked my suitcase and even took a bag and filled it with dirty clothes. I slept poorly that night and went to see my lawyer the next day. I told him about our cruise and that all I wanted was to leave this marriage. He asked me for proof, and I told him that all I had were some pictures of her sleeping on the bed. He told me that it wouldn't be enough to get out of this marriage after all these years. It didn't even prove infidelity. I told the lawyer that all I wanted was my business and half of our savings. She can take the house and everything in it, keep her car, and I'll take my pickup and business car. Our state splits the property in half, and if I'm willing to give her everything except the business, and if she agrees, we have a chance to get approved. I told him to get the paperwork ready and I'd bring her in so he could explain everything. I made it clear that she thought I had more evidence than I did and was confident she would sign the divorce papers. That evening, when I got home, she was back to her old ways and wanted to see the pictures I had. I explained to her that we would go to my lawyer and he would explain the terms of the divorce to her. If she agreed to the terms, in 60 days our divorce would be final, and I would send her the photographs I have. She said she would hire her own lawyer and I would have to pay for it. I explained to her that if she went this route, I would go to my lawyer and file for divorce on the grounds of her cheating and being at the party. I would also file a claim for deprivation of spousal affection against Carl and Tony. I told her that I would bring all possible people to court to testify. I had nothing to lose. Most of what I said I didn't even know was possible, but she didn't know that. If she goes to a lawyer, she will be afraid that all this will come out. The next day, I drove back to Steubenville and found a trailer park that had mobile homes for rent. I didn't need to buy a home, I just needed a place to sleep and relax when I'm not working. I still had friends and family in the area. Warren was less than 2 hours away for visits. I found an older model of a 3-bedroom mobile home that worked just fine for me. I paid the deposit and the first month's rent. It was furnished well enough for me, but I had to buy a few things such as a TV and DVD player. I unloaded all my stuff from the truck and drove to the tool yard to pick up my orders. While I was there, I went into the office and filed a change of address and changed beneficiaries to my daughters for all of my insurance and benefit packages. After completing deliveries that day, I spent the night in my new rented mobile home. For the first time in a week, I slept well. The next day, I called my lawyer and we made an appointment for Mary and me. I returned to my old house that night and gave Mary an ultimatum. She could meet me at the lawyer's office at noon the next day, or she could hire her own lawyer and we'd do it the hard way. I knew she was thinking a lot. She wanted to destroy me and my business, but at the same time, she would destroy her own life. She agreed to go see what my lawyer had prepared but said that she would not sign anything until she fully understood everything. I think that since she didn't know what evidence I might have of her infidelity that could be accepted in court, she didn't want to take the risk. We met at my lawyer's office at noon. We entered Aaron Tibbs' private office. I think the fact that Aaron was black completely threw Mary off balance. She had to understand that. I told him the whole story of our cruise from my point of view. Mrs. Hubble, John has asked me to draw up terms for a divorce. I believe he has made you a very generous offer. I will explain everything to you, and if necessary, you can take it to your lawyer to make sure it is a very fair offer, Aaron explained to her. You will receive the house and everything in it. You will also get to keep your car, and John will keep his truck and business vehicle. You will also receive half of our savings, and we will split any other assets we own. Mrs. Hubble, this is a very generous offer on his part. If you agree, the divorce will be final 60 days after the documents are signed. If you do not agree, we can continue with the legal proceedings. When he said, Consult your lawyer, Mary looked at me. She knew that if she did that, I would go into the cheating wife scenario and demand a divorce. Aaron continued, it's essentially a no-fault divorce. You both agree that you don't want to be married anymore. Nobody needs to know why John offered you the house and everything in it, including all the furniture and appliances. He told me the house was paid off, is that true? Yes, we paid it off 2 years ago. Let's be clear. Are you saying that I will get the house and everything in it? Asked Mary. Yes, and also half of the funds in the checking and savings accounts. Today, according to the bank statements, there are $32,000. You will each receive $16,000. What about our credit cards? Who will be responsible for paying them off? Asked Mary. You have 2 joint credit cards that currently have no balance. John has his own business card with a large balance because he pays for his tools with it. This will be his responsibility. You have 3 credit cards in your name. I could not obtain information on them without your permission, but it does not matter. You will be responsible for them. What about the cars in John's tool business? You get to keep your car and continue making payments on it if you want to keep it. John's pickup will stay with him. Now, about the business, that's the key point. John's business is an LLC corporation. It's a limited liability corporation. He pays himself a salary from the corporation's earnings. It's his life's investment, and he wants to keep the business. It costs a lot of money. Are you saying that I won't get anything from it? Mary was indignant. I built this business on my own from scratch without any help from you. All I want is what's mine. And if I want my share, what then? Mary asked. I will be legally obligated to sell the business and give you half of the profits. You will also be responsible for half of the debts for all the tools I bought recently. Mary stared at me. She knew this was the point of no return. How much will my share be? She asked. Mary, I can sell the business for any amount before I give you a penny. I'll practically give the business away for next to nothing. I'll make sure that neither of us has a penny left. Then I'll file for divorce, and that's it. What we talked about here will be invalid. You won't give up the business and the route you've spent your whole life building. I know it must cost a couple $100,000. I'm not that stupid. Aaron chimed in, Mary, what John said is true. He can sell his business for $100 if he wants. You have to decide if he hates you enough to do that. Are you willing to take the risk? He made you a very generous offer, and if what he told me is true, he has witnesses and evidence. We can go to court and let him divide all the assets in half. This will include everything you own, your house, personal belongings, checking and savings accounts, cars, and even the pensions you've accumulated over the years. All of this will be divided in the divorce, not to mention all the ugly information that will come out in the process. All he really wants is his business. He's giving you everything else. Do you really hate him that much to ruin his business? I honestly think you're making a big mistake by not accepting this offer, but that's entirely up to you. I have already prepared the divorce papers. It's all up to you now. Can I have a couple of days to think about it? Asked Mary. Yes, but if you make any purchases or withdraw money from these joint accounts, this document will become invalid. This includes John. I would like to hear from you by Friday. If you decide that your lawyer should look at the documents, I need to tell you that John asked me to file for divorce, not an annulment. John, what about the photos you're talking about? How can I be sure you're not using them anyway? You'll have to trust me, like I trusted you for 25 years. I've never cheated on you. I've been there for you through every operation, even when I was against them. I don't want our daughters to know what their mother really is like, but if you ruin my business, I won't care. I will send you the photos I have on the day of the divorce. You have my word. I signed both documents right in the office so that Mary could see that I was serious. Aaron, thank you for everything. Whatever the outcome, please call me on Friday so I know if I need to provide evidence or continue with my current life. Mary, I want you to know that I loved you all these years. I did everything I could to be there for you when you were in trouble. I don't know exactly when we started going our separate ways, but I never cheated on you. We both know you can't say the same. I just don't know when it started, and I'm no longer interested in knowing. Aaron will let me know your answer on Friday. I don't expect to see you anymore unless we go to court. I may see you at some of our kids' events, and I will be polite to you. I wish you a good life. I was on pins and needles until Friday. I decided that I would give up my business rather than give her half. During our negotiations, Mary was told that there would be no alimony because she earned the same amount as me, given that I received a salary from the business. I made my rounds, visited my clients, and returned to my mobile home at night. It was nice, and sometimes I sat and talked with my new neighbor. I didn't have a phone other than my cell phone, because they could always find me on it. On Friday evening, I received a call from Aaron. He said Mary had come and signed the divorce papers. He had already submitted them, and the marriage would be dissolved in 60 days. I asked him if she had said anything about why she agreed to it. He said she talked to our daughters, and they said if she ruined my business, they would never want to see her again. I think they believed me when I told them that their mother knew what she was doing. Then he told me something that was hard to believe. John, you're not going to like this, but she called this Carl guy and told him that you were going to incriminate him and Tony if she didn't sign the papers. I really believe he convinced her to sign the agreement. He was afraid of getting involved. I found it hard to believe she actually got his phone number so she could see him again. I think the only thing that made me angry was that I didn't get back at Carl or Tony. These two cuckolded me and laughed about it. If I could do it all over again, I would do something to get back at them. Maybe I'd get my 5th place kicked, but I wouldn't be such a weakling. Life went on, and I spent more time working. I liked my job, and besides, I had no reason to rush home. I called my daughters and gave them my new mobile number. I told them not to give it to Mary unless there was an emergency. I made a point to stop and see them whenever I was in their area. The divorce was finalized, and I made copies of the photos I had taken on my cell phone and sent them to Mary. The next day, she called me. "Who gave you my number?" I asked. "I received it from the factory. They said it was urgent, and I don't have your new mobile number. Is there a problem with the girls?" "What happened?" "Nothing happened, there was no emergency. I just got these damn photos in the mail. They're just me lying in my sleep. They don't prove anything." "You lied to me." "When did I lie?" I said I had pictures of you, and I do. I promised to send them to you, which I did. I thought you had pictures of me with Carl, Tony, and other men. I said I knew you were with these men. I never said I had pictures of you with them. You just assumed I had them. By the way, you proved me right again, and that you were in your right mind when you cheated on me. I did what I promised. Now leave me alone." I hung up. I guess it was a small victory for me, but it didn't feel as victorious. Those two scoundrels never got revenge from me. It's a pity that neither of them was married. Maybe I would have complicated their marriages. My marriage was over, and life wasn't that bad. I enjoyed my job and didn't have to worry about Mary. I lived my life and did what I liked. I planned my route so that I would see my daughters once or twice a month. I tried not to be there when their mother was around. 2 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. I know it was a dissolution of marriage, but I still called it a divorce. The company whose tools I was selling was holding a conference. They hold it every year to show us the latest tools and new advertising. Since we owned our own trucks and routes, we had to buy our own advertising. Overall, it was good business. I was my own boss and set my own hours. More than half of my sales came over the phone, and I only had to pick up the tools or mail them. I preferred to deliver to my clients because they would usually buy something else. It was part of the sales game. This year's conference was to be held at the Sheraton in Pittsburgh. I booked a room for one night so I wouldn't have to travel home, even though it wasn't that far. Dinner and drinks were paid for by the company, so I often went overboard. I left early on Saturday morning. It was only an hour and a half drive. I decided to explore Pittsburgh a little since I hadn't been there often. I remembered Judy saying she worked at the East Side Grill and bought a map to find out where it was. It was still morning when I got there and found the restaurant. I walked in, and there weren't many people there having breakfast. The hostess said good morning. I asked her if Judy was working and, if so, could I be put in her section. A minute later, Judy came up to the table and smiled when she saw me. "John, what are you doing here? It's so nice to see you." "I was told to come here, and a beautiful young lady said she would buy me breakfast. I decided to take advantage of the offer." "John, I've been thinking about you a lot. Is everything okay? Carl came here a few times and said that you and Mary were getting a divorce. He said something about how you were going to sue us all. What was that about?" "I wanted a divorce for Mary and made up all sorts of things to scare her. I actually told her I was going to sue Carl and Tony for alienation of affection. My lawyer said I had no chance, but that was enough to scare Mary. I'd like to talk to you if you have a few minutes," she said, glancing at her watch. "It'll be a little calmer in 15 minutes. After that, they'll start getting ready for dinner. Let me bring you a real man's breakfast, and then I'll come and sit with you." She brought me pancakes and eggs, bacon and sausage, and 2 pieces of toast. After she poured me coffee, she left me a jug of coffee. I must admit that it was delicious. I was almost finished with my meal when she came back and sat down. She said she wouldn't be punished, and besides, she finished work at noon on Saturdays. "So, what really brought you to Pittsburgh, John?" "The company whose instruments I sell is holding a conference at the Sheraton Inn. They do it at a different location every year. While I was eating breakfast, I thought maybe you'd be interested in coming with me." She was quiet, so I continued talking. "It starts at 6 o'clock, and after a few speeches and a preview of the new line of instruments, they throw a big party. There will be a seafood buffet and free drinks. They even hire a small group to play music. I'd love it if you came with me." "What will you do all day until evening?" asked Judy. "I have a map, and I was thinking of exploring the city a little. I don't know exactly where to go, but it will help me pass the time. So, what do you think? The last time we were together, I really enjoyed your company. Is your divorce finalized, John?" "Yes, it's been completed for a few months now. I'm currently living in a mobile home in Steubenville. Let me make you an offer, John. I finish work in an hour. Why don't you pick me up, and I'll show you around the city? Later, I'll go to the conference with you." I knew my face lit up with Judy's smile. I told her I would see her at noon. I went to pay for breakfast, and she said it was already paid for, as promised. I thanked her and left a $20 tip. When I came back for her, she said we could take her car since she knew where everything was. I enjoyed the day as she showed me the many sights of the city. After visiting the stadium, we went to the Carnegie Museum. It was gigantic. I had heard about it but had never been there. She drove past her house to show me where she lived, and then we had to go back and get my truck. She said she would be ready by 6 o'clock. It was already 5 o'clock when she dropped me off. I returned to the Sheraton, took a quick shower, and put on my suit. I headed toward Judy's house. The door was opened by a beautiful young woman. "You must be John. Mom said you would pick her up." "I'm Darcy. Judy is my mom. Mom said you met on a cruise." "Yes, it's true." I was saved by the bell ringing when Judy entered the room. "Has Darcy interrogated you?" "She has a habit of thinking she's in charge of our relationship." "I'm just worried about you, Mom," Darcy replied. "I promise to take good care of her. I'll even give you my cell phone number if you want to find us." "Thanks, but Mom always takes her phone." "It was nice meeting you, John." "It was nice meeting you too, Darcy," I replied. We talked a lot about various things, work, home, family, and so on. After the speeches and viewing of the new instruments, we found a table for 2. I knew a lot of people there and greeted them, introducing Judy as a good friend. News spread quickly in the company, and most people knew that I was divorced. I kept my word and didn't tell anyone why. While we were having dinner, I asked about Carl, Tony, and Pia. "Oh, I guess you didn't know since you don't live here, but shortly after returning from the cruise, Pia was beaten up." "What? What happened?" I asked. "She was dating a biker, and when he found out she had gone on a cruise with another man, he lost his temper." He also asked where Tony and Carl worked. "Is Pia okay?" "Yes, but Tony wasn't so lucky." "Oh my God. Did they catch this sack?" Yes, Pia called the police. He has already been tried and is serving 20 years for attempted murder and for attacking Pia. Damn, he was a very angry man, I remarked. He said he was going after Carl, but he was caught before he found him. So I guess Carl got lucky again. I couldn't believe my wife called him about our divorce. You were right, she really is a woman of easy virtue. So you're saying you're still seeing Carl? I see him when he comes to breakfast. I wouldn't go anywhere with him if you were the last person on earth. I even told the hostess at the restaurant not to put him in my area. He still stops me when I pass him by. I learned more about him on the cruise than I wanted to. I really don't like him, especially the way he treats other people. We stopped talking and started dancing. I'm not the best dancer, but I had fun. Judy didn't mind, we just enjoyed being together. We skipped a few fast songs but went back to the slow ones. She felt wonderful in my arms. She didn't seem to mind as she rested her head on my shoulder. You smell so good, I told her. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Your compliments seem so sincere. I'm used to the fake compliments waitresses get all the time. Yours seem sincere. Trust me, they are. As the evening was coming to an end, I told her, this is the most enjoyable time I've had since I don't remember when. I wish it didn't end so soon. I love being with you. It's like I've known you my whole life. John, this doesn't have to end. I don't want to be intrusive, but I don't have to go home early. I like being with you too. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Honestly, I don't want to misunderstand you. Why was I so nervous? Let me rephrase that. I haven't been with a man in a long time, even before the cruise I mentioned. Nothing happened. I want you to know that I'm not sleeping around. I'm drawn to you, though. Okay, my turn. I have a room upstairs. I'd like you to come with me so we can continue our visit. We both laughed, finished our drinks, and headed to my room. We walked in, and when I turned around after closing the door, Judy kissed me. Judy, I want to be honest with you. I may not be the best lover. I haven't slept with anyone since I was married to Mary. Just be yourself. That's the person I feel attached to, Judy replied. The next morning, we woke up and got dressed. We went down to the restaurant and had a light breakfast. It was time to take Judy home. I knew I would miss her and told her I wanted to see her again. She kissed me goodbye and gave me a piece of paper with her phone number. Call me soon. I want to see you again. I had had a wonderful time. I started calling her every Friday, making plans for Saturday or Sunday. Judy and I have been dating for over 2 months now, and as I mentioned, we spend almost every weekend together. I usually don't stay overnight, as I can be at her house within an hour and a half. We went to plays, sports matches, and even took Darcy and her friend with us. I was learning a lot about the Pittsburgh area. I wanted a more permanent relationship with Judy, but we were still discussing it. After all, my business was in Ohio and I lived in Ohio, while Judy worked in Pennsylvania and Darcy attended college there. The problem was that when I wasn't with her, I really missed her. We even started talking sometimes during the week. The issue was that after I heard her voice, I wanted to be with her even more. For a 51-year-old man, I must admit I was quite keen. I told my daughters about Judy, and they were happy for me. I asked about their mother, and they said she was dating someone but never talked much about it. My daughter Janet gave me some bad news. Her husband Paul was laid off. They were making large staff cuts at their plant. I had a long talk with Paul and asked him what he thought about my tool business. I'd love to do something like that, be my own boss, set my own hours, spend more time with Janet and the baby. I have an offer for you, Paul. Discuss it with Janet and get back to me. I'll sell you my Ohio territory, but you'll need to buy a truck. I'm thinking about buying the Pittsburgh territory, and that would be too much for one person. Paul's face lit up with joy. I told him that I would help them financially at first. The next day, I received a call from Janet. Dad, is this true? Will you help Paul start a business? Yes, but there are a few conditions you both will need to agree to. I'll come see you on Friday and explain everything. Don't tell anyone until we talk. I have to negotiate the purchase of the Pittsburgh territory first, and you and Paul will need to make some decisions. Thank you, Dad. I love you so much. At such moments, tears well up in my eyes. I spoke with the company about selling my property in Ohio to my daughter and son-in-law. A good friend of mine, Joe Grahel, was getting ready to retire and wanted to sell his territory, which included Pittsburgh and some surrounding areas. He also said that he was ready to sell his truck because he no longer needed it. On Friday, I went to see Janet and Paul. I explained to them that I had agreed to purchase the Pittsburgh territory from Joe and would sell them my territory in eastern Ohio. I knew they didn't have much money, so I offered to co-sign the loan for Joe's truck. This is what we do for our family, and I love my daughters. They could pay me for the territory in monthly payments at an agreed-upon amount. I told them this would be their joint business. I spoke with the company, and they had no problem with my proposal. When Janet was younger, she always helped me with paperwork in the evenings. I needed to call orders and update inventory. She was a great help until she got married 3 years ago. I knew she and Paul would make a great team. I often thought how nice it would be if Mary had helped me, but she preferred to work on her own. That was probably part of the reason we separated. Paul and Janet were excited. I told Paul that I would be running the Pittsburgh area starting next month. If he wanted to ride with me for the rest of this month, I would help him get comfortable in the area and explain what is expected of him. I would also introduce him to his clients. I agreed to pay him $400 a week during this training period. His income would be at least 3 times larger when he started working on his own. We went to the company office and signed all the papers for the following Monday. He met with Joe, and they agreed on the price of the truck. He would receive it on the last day of the month. A month flew by, and Janet and Paul started their own business. I was pleased that I could help them. I started my new route in the Pittsburgh area. I often stopped by the East Side Grill for breakfast to see Judy. I needed to move closer to Pittsburgh because the extra commute every day was killing me due to the cost of gas. Judy helped me find a nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was furnished, but I didn't need much. I was away most of the time anyway. The following weekend, I loaded up my truck with my belongings and took them to my new apartment. When I arrived, Judy had already put most of my things away and was helping me unload the rest. That night, we went out to dinner and then came back to dedicate my apartment. I couldn't believe how much I loved her. There was nothing I wouldn't do for her. If there is such a thing as a soulmate, then Judy was mine. We never quarreled or raised our voices at each other. If we had disagreements, we agreed that it was okay to have different opinions. If she wanted her way, she had a cute way of getting it. I knew I was in love with her, and I was pretty sure she felt the same about me. When either of us said I love you, I'm pretty sure we both meant it. I know I did. We started seeing each other every few days. It took me a while to get used to my new route, and I had to work a lot of extra hours getting to know new clients. One day, I stopped by Judy's house and saw that she was upset. It was something she couldn't hide from me. What happened? I asked. Carl showed up at work today and asked me to go with him to Youngstown, Ohio, for the weekend. I was stunned and asked, "Why should I want to go somewhere with you?" He replied, "Did you mind going on a cruise with me?" He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. I was embarrassed and told him to go to hell. He said something else, didn't he? I asked. Yes, Judy replied. He said he heard that I was hooking up with an old wimp. I said, "At least you know how to make love." Then I said loudly for everyone to hear that on the cruise, he was always so drunk that he could never get it up. "It's okay, honey. I'll go talk to that idiot. I'll let him know that if he bothers you again, he won't like it." "No, John, he's not worth it." He called me a expletive, and the owner of the restaurant kicked him out and told him not to come back. "Please, let's just forget about him. If he ever bothers me again, I will tell you. I promise." I was very angry. I wanted to take revenge on him in any way. First, he helped destroy my marriage, and now he's harassing my girlfriend. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I mentioned to Judy that maybe we could go to the Sheraton Inn again on Saturday and have our second first date there. She smiled at me and said she would love it. I knew deep down that I had to do something about Carl. I called his office on Friday and learned that he was away at a conference in Youngstown. I pretended that I had to meet him there, and the secretary gave me his number, hotel, and room number without any problems. I worked my route until about 5:30, made sure my neighbors saw me before I got into my pickup truck, and headed to Youngstown. I knew what I was about to do was wrong, but I was protecting my girlfriend. Carl made a big mistake when he contacted her, and he wouldn't leave without consequences. He was staying at a cheap motel. He probably received a daily allowance and put most of the money in his pocket. I found a motel and saw a car with Pennsylvania plates in front of his room. The room was dark, so I assumed he wasn't there. The motel was next to a bar. There were a lot of cars and motorcycles there, so I parked in their lot so I could see his room. I went out and put on a baseball cap, which I never wear, and a pair of sunglasses. I entered the bar and saw that it was full of people. I noticed Carl talking to the waitress. I quickly left the bar before anyone noticed me. I decided to drive a little further down the road. I needed gas, so I filled up the tank by paying cash. I didn't want to leave any receipts or card payments. I hadn't eaten, so I stopped at a fast food place and got myself a sandwich and a drink. About half an hour later, I returned and checked to see if Carl had returned to the motel. I stopped a little further and took my huge hunting knife. I wiped it down, put on gloves, and then headed to the motel. I was determined to kill him when he opened the door. When I approached the motel, I couldn't believe my eyes. There were 3 patrol cars with their lights flashing. Traffic was difficult. Everyone wanted to know what was happening. We had to slow down to let the ambulance pass. As I drove past Carl's room, I saw Mary's car next to his and knew she was there. Mary stood in front of the door and cried as the doctors carried the body onto a stretcher. What happened? I asked myself as I got out of traffic and drove home. Someone beat me to it and killed Carl. What was Mary doing there? Was she the friend Janet had mentioned? I was terrified as I drove down the highway. When I drove through another city, I threw my gloves, baseball cap, and fast food packaging into the trash. I didn't want to leave anything in the car that could connect me to that place. I felt a little better. I'd watched enough television crime shows to know that I had the basics covered. Funny, I didn't do anything I planned, but someone beat me to it. When I got back to town, I went to one of the bars I visited occasionally, sat down, and had a few drinks with people I knew. While I was sitting there, Janet called. She said she and Paul were very excited about their business and felt that they had become closer to each other. We talked a little, and she asked how best to transfer money to me. I gave her my new address and told her I would just send a check. I asked her about her sister, and she said Susan was doing great in college. Susan was in her 3rd year, studying to become a nurse. She called me probably twice a month, usually when she was short on money. It didn't bother me, they were my daughters. I asked Janet how she and her mother were doing. She said she saw her every few days. Her mother was dating someone but never really talked about it. Janet also mentioned that her mother was going out with an old friend for the weekend. Now I knew that this friend was Carl. After speaking with Janet, I called Judy and asked if she wanted to spend the evening with me. She said that Darcy had gone to see friends and she would be glad to see me. I left the bar and went to Judy's. She said she had just returned from aerobics, where she goes twice a week. I just wanted to make sure our plans for tomorrow are in place. I'll pick you up at 5. Don't forget your swimsuit. I want to use the jacuzzi and maybe the pool. Don't worry, I'll be ready and waiting. John, in case I haven't told you this recently, I really love you. I love you too, Judy, more than I've ever loved anyone, I replied, and I meant it. I kissed her, and we just sat there hugging each other. I don't know what we watched. I was there for about half an hour when my cell phone rang. I looked at my watch, it was 10:30. Who's calling me at this late hour? I asked myself. The phone screen showed that the call was from the Youngstown Police Department. I answered, and it was Mary's voice. John, I'm at the Youngstown Police Station. Something bad happened. I pretended to be surprised. Judy looked at me, concerned. Are the girls okay? What happened? Why are you calling so late from Youngstown? John, Carl Crow was killed this evening, Mary said in an agitated voice. Who is Carl Crow? I asked, looking at Judy. She reminded me that it was Carl from the cruise. I pretended that I didn't know his last name. So why are you calling me? I never loved this man, and of course, I did not kill him. I didn't want to show sympathy for this man. Mary knew I didn't love him. By the way, what does this have to do with you? The police want to talk to you, so I called. I'll give the phone to the officer. She didn't answer my questions about why she was there, but I understood that she was his companion. I turned to Judy and repeated what I had been told. Carl Crow had been killed in Youngstown. She looked a little shocked. A police officer answered the phone. I told him I was with my girlfriend and put the phone on speaker so I wouldn't have to repeat everything twice. Mr. Hubble, I'm Detective Anderson of the Youngstown Police Department. Is your girlfriend Judy Wentz? Yes, it's me, Judy replied. We need to talk to both of you as soon as possible about your whereabouts this evening. Is it possible for you to go to the Pittsburgh station, or could I send an officer to where you are? I don't understand. You're saying Carl Crow was killed, and you think we have something to do with it? I understand he was killed in Youngstown and we're in Pittsburgh. Are we the suspects? Mr. Hubble, at this moment, everyone who knew Carl Crow is a suspect. The sooner we get your testimony, the sooner we can eliminate you as a suspect. Since you are together now, can you go to the station? You will be there waiting for the detective. Can it wait until morning? It's almost 11 o'clock. This is a murder investigation, Mr. Hubble. The sooner we talk to you, the sooner we can eliminate you as a suspect. I looked at Judy, and she thought we should go and sort this out. I told the detective that we would be at the Pittsburgh station within half an hour. After I hung up, Judy looked at me intently. I swear she could almost read my mind. You didn't kill him, John. No, why are you even asking me this? Because I know you, John, and I know you've been wanting to get back at him since the cruise. I can see something is bothering you. I'm just surprised that Mary was probably with him. I even thought maybe she was involved somehow. I've just got a lot on my mind right now. I understand, John. I'm here for you, Judy said as we prepared to go to the police station. She left a note for Darcy so she wouldn't worry if she got home before her mother. They had a great mother-daughter relationship. When we arrived at the station, Detective Allen asked if we were John Hubble and Judy Wentz. We answered in the affirmative, and he thanked us for coming. He said that he and another detective would speak to us separately for obvious reasons. I told Judy I'd see her later and went with the detective. I knew enough from crime shows to recognize that I was in an interrogation room. I was offered coffee, which I accepted, and I brought my magazine with me, assuming it might be needed. I spoke first. Sir, I would like to ask a few questions. Mr. Hubble, I will try to answer all your questions after you answer mine. Tell me how you knew Carl Crow. I explained to the detective about our cruise and how it had contributed to the destruction of my marriage. You could say you weren't very fond of Mr. Crow. When was the last time you saw or talked to him? The last time I saw him was when he entered a party on the cruise with Mary, my ex-wife. I haven't seen or spoken to him since. Where have you been all day today and this evening? Am I a suspect? Do you think I killed Carl? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Calm down, Mr. Hubble, the detective said. Everyone is a suspect at this point. We are just doing our job. Since you are divorced from your ex-wife and she was also at the crime scene, it is only natural that we would want to talk to you. Believe me, we are talking to everyone we can until we figure this out. So where were you today? I gave him my log with all the stops for the day. He asked if he could make a copy of it later, and I agreed. Where were you after 6:30? I was at home finishing my paperwork, which I do every evening. It sometimes takes an hour or two. After that, I went to the bar and had a couple of beers with my friends. He asked for names, and I provided them. I also mentioned that I had spoken to the neighbors when I got home. What time did you go to the bar? I'm not sure exactly, maybe 7:30, maybe after 8. My daughter called me while I was there, maybe she can tell you what time she called. After that, I went to Judy's, and we watched TV until Mary called. After that, we went there. The detective said he would be back in a few minutes to make a copy of my log. I sat and drank my coffee, feeling nervous even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I wasn't sure if someone was watching me through the two-way mirror. He returned 20 minutes later. "Mr. Hubble," he said, "Judy told us that Carl said he was going to Youngstown and asked her to go with him. Why didn't you mention that?" "You didn't ask me," Judy replied, sounding angry. "Carl asked me to go to a conference in Youngstown. I told him I never wanted to see him again. We argued, and he called me a expletive. The owner of the restaurant, Henry, kicked him out. Didn't she tell you that?" "Actually, she did. She also said that maybe you should talk to him." "I did say that, but she asked me to leave it as is, so I did. Do you want to test my hands for gunpowder residue like they do on TV shows? That will prove I didn't fire the gun." The detective chuckled. "What's so funny? Isn't this some kind of proof?" "Actually, it is, but it won't help in this case. You see, Carl Crow was stabbed to death." "Sorry, I didn't know," I replied. "Mr. Hubble, I will be checking your alibis. You are a suspect until we find the killer. You must understand that. Carl stole your wife, destroyed your marriage, and now tried to have an affair with your girlfriend. I'm just telling it like it is. We have nothing to detain you, but we can call you again. How is my ex-wife involved in this matter?" "My daughter told me she was gone for the weekend. She didn't know with whom. I understand she came to meet Carl." "Yes, she told us that Carl called her on Thursday and asked her to spend the weekend with him. When she arrived, she knocked on the door but there was no answer. She tried to open the door and saw Carl Crow dead. She called 911 and the police came almost immediately. That's all I can tell you for now. Thank you for coming and cooperating with us. Just stay in touch if we need to talk to you again." I walked out into the waiting room where Judy was waiting for me. I walked up to her, hugged her tightly, and we went home. On the way home, we discussed what they had asked us. Her questions were similar to mine. She said she was being as honest as possible. I remember her saying that when you tell the truth, it is much easier than trying to remember a lie. She was so right. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning when we returned to her house. I asked her if our date the next night was still on, and she replied, "I'm not going to let a dead man ruin an evening with the man I love." We kissed, and I went home. I didn't sleep well, but I guess that was to be expected. The next day, no one called. I was quite surprised. I went shopping and bought a new suit, then went to a jewelry store and bought an engagement ring for Judy. In the evening, I picked up Judy, and she was ready on time. She looked beautiful. I opened the truck door for her, and she climbed inside. I saw a lot of her legs, and she just smiled. She said that at work, everyone was talking about Carl's murder. Everyone had their own opinion. Judy told people that she knew Carl, but there was nothing more to tell. She never mentioned me because no one knew how or when we met. We arrived at the Sheraton and checked in. After we carried our suitcases to the room, we decided to go down to the bar and have a drink while we waited for our dinner reservation. We talked a little more about the case since it had just happened. I told her I didn't know Mary was dating Carl. The detective had told me that Mary claimed they were just friends and met about once a month. We were invited to dinner and had a wonderful meal. After dinner, I ordered us a drink. When it arrived, I took out the ring in a small box. I knew this would surprise Judy, judging by the look on her face. "Judy, I know we haven't been together that long, but I love you very much, and I'm asking you to marry me and be my wife." Judy had tears in her eyes, but didn't answer immediately. I felt lost and just sat there. I knew she had heard me. "John, I love you more than I've ever loved any man, but I need to tell you a story. I know you never asked me about Darcy's father or why I was never married. Darcy's dad and I were together for 4 years. I got pregnant, and when I told him, the first thing he asked was, 'Are you sure it's my baby?' and then asked if I would get rid of it. I was stunned. I thought I knew this man, but he didn't want his child. Of course, we broke up, and I never saw him again. My parents were mad that I didn't make him take a paternity test or anything to prove he was the father. I told my parents it wasn't about money. I didn't want such a person to be around my child. I didn't want to give him the right to decide anything in Darcy's life. My parents understood. As far as father figures in Darcy's life, she had my father, my uncles, and 2 brothers. All of these people were good men in her life. My mother's brother, my uncle, was recently divorced, and he invited us to stay at his house. I agreed. My uncle was a truck driver and was only home 3 or 4 nights a week. I cleaned the house and cooked for him if he wanted a hot meal. I got a job at a restaurant where I still work, and my mother looked after Darcy. She was my life and the reason I never got married. I didn't want some strange man telling Darcy what to do. I know this may seem strange, but this is how I felt. My uncle died of a heart attack 2 years ago, and in his will, he left his house and all his property to me. I dated, as I told you, but I never met that special person I loved until I met you. Then marry me. We make a great couple, I replied. John, the problem is that I believe in honesty. Lack of communication is the leading cause of divorce. Couples don't talk and don't tell each other when something is wrong. It can destroy a marriage. John, I love you with all my heart, but I know you are hiding something from me. I can feel it. How can I marry you if you can't trust me like I trust you? I know we are soulmates, and you can almost read my mind. Okay, Judy, I'll tell you what's bothering me. First of all, I want you to know that I didn't kill Carl. I planned to, but someone beat me to it. That night, when you were upset and said that Carl called you a expletive, it bothered me that I let such an idiot get away with it. I felt I had to protect you at all costs. I didn't care about the consequences, although I hoped I had considered all possible options. I finished my route early and drove to Youngstown to kill Carl. I called his office on Friday and told the secretary that I should meet him. She gave me the name of the hotel and his room number. I went there, but his room was dark. I decided to go to the bar next to the motel, but it was full of bikers, and I saw Carl talking to the waitress. I quickly left and drove further down the road to get gas and some fast food. I was gone for about half an hour, and when I returned to the motel, I saw police cars and Mary's car in front of Carl's door. Mary was standing on the sidewalk, crying and talking to the police. I put away the hunting knife and drove home as quickly as possible. I stopped at the bar as I had planned after the murder. I thought about you, and that's why I stopped by. I just couldn't let Carl hurt the girl I love and get away with it. That's it. That's my secret. I couldn't tell the police because they don't know who killed Carl, and I'm still their suspect. They might think I had time to go there, kill Carl, and come back. I swear I didn't do it, but only because someone beat me to it. Judy had tears in her eyes. She took the ring, handed it to me, and extended her left hand. Yes, John, I will marry you. I put the ring on her finger, and we kissed. Then we went to our room. We slept late the next day. After that, we headed to her house to inform Darcy of our upcoming wedding plans. Darcy was very happy for us. She said her mom seemed much happier since we started dating. She asked her mother if she could be a bridesmaid and help organize the wedding. I knew Darcy's confession meant a lot to Judy. We decided to get married in 2 months. We chose a Saturday, and I suggested we have the wedding at the Sheraton Inn, which we both loved. This way, everyone coming from other cities would be able to stay there. Plans were started. Darcy said she only wanted the invitation lists from me. She and her mother would take care of the rest. I knew money would be an issue, so I pulled Judy aside and told her I had enough saved to pay for the wedding. She smiled at me and said that soon I would meet her whole family. Her parents were alive, and I would have to argue with her father about who would pay for the wedding. My father had said years ago that he had saved money for either college or Judy's wedding, whichever came first. Judy hadn't gone to college and hadn't gotten married yet. I started calling my family on Sunday. Everyone was delighted. Both my daughters were happy for me. They said that the police had contacted them about Carl's murder. They needed to know their whereabouts. Now they knew who their mother had been with on the cruise. I told them that I was not involved and that I had happier things to think about. I mentioned the wedding date and said they would receive an invitation. I called my brother and sister, who lived in Steubenville. My mom and dad were still alive and promised they would come to the wedding. It's funny, but Judy will be meeting my family for the first time, and I will be meeting hers. I was close to my siblings but didn't see them often. On Monday, I returned to work. All my clients noticed that I looked happy. I told them I was going to get married. I knew I couldn't be happier. I stopped by Judy's after work. She told me that Pia had come to see her. Pia mentioned that the police had questioned her about her whereabouts on the night of Carl's murder. Pia had been working at the bar that night and hadn't known anything about the murder until Sunday. The police wanted to know about Zach. Pia couldn't say much. He had biker friends, but she didn't know them. She remembered that Zach had said during the trial that he intended to take revenge on Carl but didn't have the chance. The police thought that perhaps his friends from the biker club had finished the job. I recalled that there had been many bikers in the bar, but I couldn't tell the police. I shouldn't have been there. I assumed they would figure it out themselves. We continued preparing for the wedding, and everything was going well. Over the weekend, Judy introduced me to her parents. They turned out to be wonderful people. Her father welcomed me into the family and said he was happy for us. He also mentioned that he had discussed it with Judy and would pay for the wedding. That's what fathers do, he told me. I knew he was right and didn't argue with him. A few days later, I was at a restaurant talking to Judy when the cops came. Judy said many of the officers frequented the restaurant and were her friends. She introduced me to them, and I asked if there was any news on the Carl murder case. We have suspects but not enough evidence to charge anyone. We're trying to find out if someone followed Carl from the bar to his room. I don't know if you know, but there were a lot of bikers in the bar, but we have no information on whether they were friends with Zach. Detectives are going to talk to Zach in jail this week but aren't expecting much. Thank you, officer. I hope to be removed from the list of suspects soon. Since you're Judy's friend, I'll tell you that your alibi checks out. I can't say more. They headed to their table, and another waitress took their order. I felt a little better. I finished my breakfast and went to work. Judy and Darcy were preparing for the wedding. Every evening after work, I tried not to disturb them because I knew they didn't need my advice. I took Judy to Steubenville to introduce her to my parents. They immediately fell in love with her. We talked for a while and took them out to dinner. They said they were coming to the wedding and staying the night. They mentioned they were getting too old to drive long distances in the dark, so we promised to book a room for them. With 1 week left before the wedding, I was about to be a married man again. Judy and I decided that I would move into her house. She and Darcy said it was what they expected. Darcy was finishing her second year of college. I knew she was attending a local college, studying accounting. One evening, I stopped by and asked Darcy to talk. She was a little surprised, as was Judy. We sat down in the living room. Darcy, what are your plans after you graduate? Find a job and start working, I think. Why? Do you know someone who could hire me? She knew that I communicate with businessmen every day. Actually, I do. Let me explain. Using the example of my daughter and son-in-law, Paul does most of the work on the route, driving and delivering orders. Janet does the paperwork, keeping records, and even calling customers. She looks after the books. I do it all by myself now and have done so for many years. It takes several hours a day and takes away from the time I could be spending with your mother. I was wondering if you would like to become my secretary and perhaps a salesperson. Are you serious, John? Judy asked. Yes, if she wants to start after the wedding. I'm all for it. It will be a part-time job until she finishes school. I looked at my records, and I can pay her $300 a week initially. Of course, I will show her what to do, and we can call this a probationary period. If she wants to continue after that, we will see how much we can pay her and conclude a formal agreement. Darcy really liked this idea. She would go to school during the day, and I would show her the paperwork in the evening. I told her that if she wanted to leave at any time, I wouldn't hold her back. This would be a great solution for me. Darcy would have a job and could work from home if she wanted. She would have the opportunity to understand whether she wanted to do this all her life. For me, this would mean getting rid of all the paperwork I had to do and freeing up time for Judy. I think that was part of the problem in my marriage to Mary, even though she didn't want to work with me. I knew everything was going great for Janet and Paul. The wedding was wonderful. I met all of Judy and Darcy's relatives. They were genuinely happy for us. Many of them couldn't understand why Judy had never married. This will remain Judy's and my secret. My family thought Judy was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I had to agree with them. Perhaps our more mature and wiser state played a role. We decided that we would visit our relatives more often. We became one big happy family. Janet and Susan pulled me aside and told me they really liked Judy. She makes you happy, and you deserve to be happy, they said. We didn't talk much about their mother. They just mentioned that she goes to work and is still seeing someone. I think she just couldn't find another weak-willed person like me to fulfill her every whim. Probably not the nicest thing to say on your wedding day, but as Judy told me, always be honest. After the wedding reception, some relatives stayed at the hotel while others went home. Everyone said they had a great time and that the wedding was wonderful. Judy and I went to our room and made love. The next morning, we had breakfast with relatives who were staying the night. I paid the bill. Judy's father just smiled at me. He knew what it meant to have a family. We decided not to go on our honeymoon until our first anniversary. I was still growing my business and needed to find a replacement while I was away for over a week. It's been a year since we got married, and I have to say that life is wonderful. Darcy has completed her studies and now works full-time in our business. Judy still works as a waitress, one of those rare jobs that she truly loves. Darcy turned out to be a real asset to the business. She found ways to make it simpler and more efficient. She talks to Janet often, and they exchange ideas. Darcy offered to go on the route with me one day a week so she could get to know our clients. She has a personality like her mother's and is good with people. When we visited businesses, she always came back with more orders. Now I pay her a higher salary and 5% of the additional sales she generates. Every week, she spends one day on the route with me and has studied my entire route. When Judy and I got ready for our one-year anniversary trip, Darcy said she would take over the itinerary. Everything turned out just great. Judy and I went on a week-long cruise to Cancun. One thing we decided in advance was no nudist beaches, but we could be without anything in our cabin. As for Carl's murder, the case was still not closed. The police spoke to Zach, and he just laughed when they asked him if he had anything to do with it. Let's just say I always get my revenge. You'll never know who did it, he laughed at the police. They didn't know whether to believe him or not. In prison, this added to his respect. The police did not have enough evidence to charge anyone. My daughters are doing well. I explained to Janet and Paul how their business was going. Susan was due to graduate this year to become a nurse. She was dating a young intern, and they would probably get married soon. As for Mary, she minds her own business. The girls talk to her, but I haven't seen her since Carl died. Even then, she didn't know I was there. Looking back, I think the cruise with Mary will remain a memorable romance. What do you think of our story today? I think the husband immediately realized what the wife was going to do when she was getting so much attention. What's your impression? Write in the comments. Until new videos.